For centuries, scholars have debated one of the thorniest questions in biblical history. Why did the Israelites build Bamot, private altars, even after God's law commanded central worship? Some critics claim the existence of Bamot proves that the Torah, particularly the book of Deuteronomy, was written late, during King Josiah's time. But today, we're going to expose the cracks in that theory and show how the story of the Bamot actually proves the Torah's ancient roots, not its invention. Let's dive in. Modern biblical critics like Julius Wellhausen argued that Israelite religion evolved slowly, from paganism to monotheism, and that laws centralizing worship in Jerusalem only appeared in Josiah's reign. Even Archaeological Kaufmann, a giant among scholars, was trapped in this theory. He wrote, "It's impossible that a law mandating central worship existed for centuries without being enforced." History of Israelite Faith, Part 1, page 20. But, this claim is actually a classic logical fallacy. It kind of assumes that because something wasn't fully enforced, it didn't exist at all. In truth, the idea of a central place for God's service is really woven throughout the earliest biblical narratives. Shiloh was described as the place where God caused his name to dwell, as we see in the book of Joshua, chapter 18 verse 1, and 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 3. The fierce opposition to unauthorized altars in Joshua chapter 22 shows that even then, unity of worship was definitely expected. King Solomon's prayer at the dedication of the temple views Jerusalem as the one true center, as written in 1 Kings chapter 8. And Nathan the prophet promised David a place of rest where God's presence would be permanent, which is mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 7 verses 10 through 13. Even the removal of Bamot by righteous kings like Asa and Hezekiah, as mentioned in 1 Kings chapter 15 verse 14 and 2 Kings chapter 18 verse 4, demonstrates that the law wasn't new, it was finally being enforced. These aren't late inventions, they're historical memories. Critics argue, but if the law against Bamot existed, why did so many Israelites build them? Simple, the reality of history is messy. Did every American immediately obey prohibition laws in the 1920s? Did every citizen follow civil rights laws in the 1960s? Of course not. Violation of a law doesn't mean the law didn't exist. The Torah itself explains that the ban on Bamot was only binding after Israel had a secure, centralized place, when you cross the Jordan and the Lord gives you rest, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 12 verses 9 to 11. Before Solomon's temple, Israel was fragmented and struggling for survival. Without a chosen city, worship at local altars was, tolerated. But once the temple was built in Jerusalem, the rules changed. Rabbi Yehudah, in the Talmud, Zevachim 113a, explains, "When Bamot were permitted, even a non-priest could offer sacrifices. The law adapted to historical realities, not because it evolved, but because the Torah actually anticipated these stages." What about stories like Saul sacrificing before battle, Elijah on Mount Carmel, or offerings to prophets like Elisha? These were emergency exceptions, not regular temple service. So Elijah's sacrifice on Carmel wasn't really standard worship. It was actually a one-time dramatic showdown against Baal worshippers, as described in 1 Kings chapter 18. And, the firstborn sacrifices brought to prophets like Elisha weren't temple offerings at all. They were really just gifts of food. There's no evidence here that undermines the law of central worship. Josiah didn't invent the Torah. Instead, he sealed a historical process, enforcing long-standing laws that, honestly, many had just neglected. It's kind of like when modern governments rediscover and start enforcing forgotten constitutional clauses. Even archaeology supports this view. Despite dozens of excavations across Israel, evidence of organized local worship is actually pretty scarce before the Temple period. Scholars have found only a handful of ancient sanctuaries, like the one at Arad, and even there they probably predate Solomon's temple. As Professor M. Haran noted, the idea of centralized worship wasn't an abstract ideal. It was linked to the real existence of the temple. The centralization command wasn't a fantasy. It was the goal from the beginning. Conclusion: a story of struggle, not invention. The sin of the high places isn't proof that the Torah was written late. It's proof that human beings struggled, as they always do, to live up to divine ideals. But the ideals themselves? They were there from the start. The Torah's call for unity, the vision of a chosen city, the promise of one God worshipped in one place, that wasn't Josiah's innovation. It was Israel's destiny. History is not just what we find, it's also what we choose to see.